Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video I'm going to be crocheting a beautiful tulip. This is a very beginner friendly tutorial and I'll be using a weight 3 acrylic yarn and a 3.5mm hook. The weight of your yarn and your hook size can have a huge impact on how the sizing of your tulip turns out. I prefer my tulips to be a little bit smaller, but I made some massive ones, so do keep that in mind. I'll also be using a stitch marker, some polyfill, a sewing needle, and some tacky glue, which I forgot to show, and my yarn and wooden skewer for my stem. To start, I'll be making a magic ring. I'm using my 2 fingers and wrapping my yarn around them. And at the top of my fingers, I wrap one piece of yarn over the other to create an X. Then I take my hook and place it under the first piece of yarn and over the second, and I use that hook to grab that second piece of yarn and pull it through. I remove my fingers, and now I'm chaining 1 by yarning over and pulling through the loop on my hook, which creates a small knot and secures my magic ring. Now I'll be working into this ring by doing 7 single crochets. To do this, I'm inserting my hook into my ring and yarn over. I pull through that magic ring, then I yarn over and pull through the 2 loops on the hook. Then I take my stitch marker and mark this first stitch that I've just created. It was a little hard to see here, so I tried to do a close-up. You want to go under the top 2 pieces of yarn here. And I'm going to repeat that process and do 6 more single crochets into the magic ring. I'm just finishing up my last one, and when you're done, you can pull on this string and that will close your magic ring. In the next round, we'll be working into that first stitch, so I remove my stitch marker and insert my hook there to do another single crochet. We'll be doing increases, so it's 2 single crochets in each stitch. After I do my first one, again I mark it with my stitch marker. And I go back into that same stitch to do another single crochet. I repeat that all the way around. So I insert my hook, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the 2 loops on my hook. Now once we get to that first stitch, instead of doing 2 single crochets in this one, I'll just be doing 1. And then the rest of the stitches I'll continue my increase by doing 2 in each stitch. So just in this first stitch is 1 single crochet, and again I mark it using my stitch marker. And in the rest of the stitches we'll put 2 single crochets. If your bottom here is starting to loosen a little bit, you can always pull on the string from the magic ring to tighten your work. Now we're back at the first stitch, and from here the pattern is very simple. We're going to do 1 single crochet in every stitch until we have 14 rows in total. So I insert my hook, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the 2 loops on my hook. And I'm just going to be continuing this all the way around. At some point you'll notice your work starting to curl, and this is a good sign. From here, if you want, you can flip your tulip like so. This can make it easier to see the stitches while you're doing your single crochet. I'm just about finishing up here. I've counted 14 rows, so now I'm grabbing some scissors to cut my yarn. You'll want to leave a long tail to be able to sew into that top of your tulip. I left way too long of a tail. I think I'm a little paranoid about having too short of a tail, so you definitely don't need one as long as mine. And to secure this even better, I'm just chaining one by yarning over and pulling through the loop on my hook, and I pull the yarn fully through. And this piece of yarn from the bottom of my tulip, I'm just going to be tucking away in there. I'm grabbing some polyfill and filling up my tulip. You don't want it to be understuffed, and you also don't want it to be overstuffed, but this really gets all squished in there nicely, so you can typically fill in more than you think. Now I'm grabbing my sewing needle and pulling the end of my yarn through. I'm pushing the two sides of my tulip together like this, and I'm using my needle to pull the yarn through that first row in the middle. And I'm going to go back in once more. Now we've created this little loop here in the center, and I'm pushing my needle right under it and pulling my yarn through to the other side. Now I'm going back in through that little loop and going to the opposite side. And from here, I'm kind of just going back and forth a bit to make sure that it's secured nicely. Once that's all done, I'm pushing my needle down into the center of my tulip and through the bottom to the very center, and this will secure your piece very nicely. Now let's make our stem. Ideally, a thicker yarn will be easier to wrap around a wooden skewer. However, I really liked this color of green. It is a thinner yarn, so I'm doubling up and using two. So I'm putting two pieces of yarn together and acting like they're one. And to start this off, I'm making a knot around my finger, which is easier to do than to make the knot around the wooden skewer. Then I place the wooden skewer in the knot and tighten it. And I can leave this tip without yarn because my tulip will be covering it. Now I'm wrapping the yarn around just until I've covered this tail. Now I can place my index finger and my thumb in between my yarn and use my other hand to rotate the skewer, and this will make it wrap around a lot faster. Once we've gotten near the bottom, I'm cutting off some yarn and leaving enough to wrap around the remaining area, plus a little bit extra, and I'm taking my sewing needle and placing it on top of my stick like this. Then I continue wrapping my yarn around the stick and my needle. I'm careful not to wrap it too tight here though. Once at the bottom, I'm pulling my yarn through here, and because this is a bit of a thin yarn, this can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And now I can just pull that sewing needle through. So my yarn here comes out on the other end, and from here I'm able to make a few adjustments. And if you turn the yarn in one direction, it'll cause for it to tighten around your stick. And you can continue to pull down on this tail too to make it better secured. Now I'll be taking my tacky glue, and I do have a paper towel out and some gloves just because it can get a little bit messy. You can always use hot glue or super glue, but I do prefer to use tacky glue just because it's non-toxic. I'm cutting off that tail, and now I'm just using a little bit of tacky glue to set that into place and make sure that nothing budges. I'm also placing some tacky glue onto the tip of my wooden skewer. And we're going to push that through into the tulip in the very center. And I like to add a little extra tacky glue around here just to make sure that it's very secure. And now we can cut off that tail since that will be secured by the glue. And now we just wait for the glue to dry, and it does dry clear. And here's our final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on my Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art.